Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
You know, every once in a while it's important to go outside of your comfort zones. And if you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you are in the seats with once again. As always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I am the host of this podcast where we talk with a wide-ranging variety of entertainment industry professionals to talk about not only current projects, but state of the business, how they got started, what they see going forward, and all sorts of fun stuff in between. And if you need a reminder to subscribe and make sure you don't miss an episode, please subscribe to us over at Apple Podcasts, at Spotify Podcasts, and you can find every single episode archived over on our YouTube channel at In the Seats. You can follow us on social media, either at In the Seats or at It's Podcast One for all the latest updates. And finally, please visit us over at intheseats.ca, where it all began for the latest and greatest movie news, reviews, updates, and all sorts of fun things. On this particular episode, we are talking with actor and stand-up comedian Charles Gould, who stars in It Cuts Deep, which is on VOD as we speak, and it's a dark, really deadpan horror comedy that it's not going to be for everyone, but it works so exceptionally well because it's the story of a couple while on Christmas vacation. They're thinking about their future together, and while Ashley, wants to get married and have kids, Sam is just terrified by all this. But then when a third party comes in, Sam just spirals out of control and starts questioning their relationship, and things get more and more tense, and well, obviously things don't end very well, but it's one of those movies that is going to catch you off guard because it is so deadpan hilarious that you'll almost feel a little guilty laughing at some of the jokes. It's that kind of movie, but it's really well crafted from writer-director Nicholas Santos, and it stars Charles Gould, who and this is his first leading role in a feature. He's done a couple of other things, but he's an interesting guy, and he's traditionally a stand-up comic. And the story of how he got the part is, well, it's one to be believed. It's one I've never heard before, but it's certainly a first. And he talks about the movie and sort of the intent and of it all, and what he hopes for in his career going forward, and just sort of the interesting mix that horror and comedy has always brought to the big screen, like we see in It Cuts Deep. And check it out, and hope you enjoy our talk with Charles. No, I mean, obviously, first off, congratulations on the film. I loved it because, I mean, it's perfectly deadpan, but still kind of works in that horror genre. But stand-up comedian to horror slasher seems like a bit of a stretch. Can you walk me through sort of the story of how you got involved?
Yeah, sure. So Nick had actually seen me do stand-up, and I think he liked the fact that my delivery was a little dry, kind of cringy is not the word I would use to describe it, but that's been the word that other people have used to describe my style of humor. So I think he really wanted this to be a comedy, and he really wanted this to ultimately, at the end of the day, be really funny. And I think he just trusted that I would be able to do the horror stuff. And yeah, it was really hard for me personally to do the horror stuff and to like really do like real acting. But Nick was really helpful, and so was Quinn, actually, the actress, and they really helped me when it came to like the serious scenes and like the horror stuff.
Is this the first time you've sort of had to carry an entire thing like
Yes,
this?
for sure. Yes. And I remember Nick asked me to do it. He was like, "Hey, do you want to star in my horror movie?" After, because he would come to my stand-up show all the time. And that also, I think it was one night where I like really bombed, actually, which is kind of interesting because I think he like saw me bomb and he was like, "This guy's perfect for my movie." So it was like a night after I bombed. Nick came up to me and he was like, "Hey, do you want to be in my horror movie?" I think you'd be really good. And I was like, yeah, of course. And he was like, cool. And then he sent me the script and I was like, oh, has two characters in it. And he wants me to play one of the two characters in the entire movie. And I was immediately overcome with anxiety. And I was like, how am I going to do this?
Well, at the very least, that's probably the best night you've had bombing.
Yes.
Bomb
Oh
is going to
no.
lead the feature.
I was on another interview and people were like, "Can you tell us your bomb stories?" And none of those have ever ended in me getting a part. They've always ended in me getting kicked out of a venue or being booed from stage. So definitely the best possible ending to a bomb.
Now, I mean, horror and comedy, especially throughout the history of movies, have always kind of worked together. And I'm kind of curious, from your perspective as a stand-up, why do you think the two genres have always worked well?
Because I think the goal of both is to elicit a reaction from the audience. When you go into a horror movie, when you're making a horror movie, you have one goal. You want to scare the audience. You also, depending on the horror movie, you want to make them think. And in this case, you want to make them laugh. But ultimately, your goal is you want people to be scared. And in comedy, no matter what, and once again, you want to do all those things. You want to make people think, you want to make people feel good. But at the end of the day, you have one goal, and that is to make people laugh. So I think that when you have that one driving goal in the genre, it makes it kind of easier to understand and cross over because you can just kind of understand, okay, I'm used to just trying to make people laugh. This is the time to make people laugh. And then you go, okay, now this is the time to make people scared. It's like they're both kind of black and white in that way. And that's why I think they can go together really well.
Well, and that brings up something interesting because, I mean, especially in stand-up, so much of your act is geared on getting a reaction, but when you're on set, people are getting paid to not get a reaction. Like you
Yes.
like as a performer, you're not getting sort of that feedback that you're used to. How much of an adjustment was it for you? Like were you in the shoot 3 days and going, "Oh my God, I'm terrible at this"?
No, actually, it was the other way around. I kind of started to feel better and better. I First of all, Nick was really good. It was really good to have Nick around. He was really supportive and he knew exactly what he wanted. So if we did a take and it was supposed to be funny and I didn't feel like it was funny, if he was like, no, it was funny, don't worry about it, then I trusted him and I was able to move on. We did a lot of improv. So we would shoot one scene as written,
Hmm.
then we would shoot one scene me and Quinn and John Anderson, who plays Nolan, got to do whatever we wanted. And then we would shoot another, and then we would kind of take Nick would come in and Nick would work with us and be like, okay, what from the improv did you really, really like? And then he'd be like, cool, let's incorporate this part from the improv and this part from the written scene, and let's shoot it again, the same scene. So it always felt fresh. And I always could actually depend in my comedian brain. I always knew my comedian lizard brain that I would be able to get laughs from the crew on the improv because I kind of knew that those were half throwaway takes. So I knew that I could play to the crew for that stuff. So I was getting laughs kind of throughout, and that did kind of drive me a little bit. But I also did become comfortable with being like, okay, nobody laughed at this, but Nick thinks it was good, and Nick thinks it's time to move on. Then I'm cool.
How like when you're working on a movie like this, where like you say, there's basically two characters plus more or less a third for a good chunk of it. How is the dynamic going back and forth? Because especially in the scenes with John, because John's playing it really amped up and you're basically having to play it straight. How do you sort of balance out that energy?
Yeah, that actually was kind of tough. I Because Quinn and I were working really, really hard to make our characters really grounded and realistic.
Yeah.
And we wanted all of our humor and all of our kind of like relationship stuff to come from a really real place, and that was really important to us. And then just like a bomb dropped John in on us, and John was like crazy. It was hard. It was hard to figure out how to act off that, which I think ended up being kind of a brilliant move because I think you can see in the movie we don't know how to react to Nolan.
Yeah.
And that's real. We didn't really know how to react to John. John was such a different vibe from Quinn and I. And it did throw me off as an actor, but I was able to use it and it ended up being really, really good. I think it comes through in the performance that like, this is a movie we thought we were seeing. This is a couple we thought we had. And then boom, here comes this like huge anvil, blows it up. And it happened in real life. It was actually happening on set. So I'm glad that it reads that way too.
It's almost like he gave you a built-in heckler to sort of make you feel more comfortable for working on a movie set.
Yeah, he definitely, and it's funny because Nick, in between takes, he would like whisper stuff in my ear and in John's ear, and then like not tell the other person what it was going to be. So we were always on our toes being like, okay, Nick just whispered something to John. I know John's going to do something crazy. Or he would like whisper to me. He'd be like, just in the middle of John's speech, just walk up and knock what he's holding in his hands to the ground. And then like we'd be doing the thing and I would just go up and I would do it. And it was so funny and it was always amazing. And yeah, so he actually built in 2 hecklers for John and me.
Was how did you ultimately get into stand-up? Was it just a means to an end for acting, or for you has stand-up always been sort of the primary goal?
It was a means to an end for acting at first. I think I moved to New York after college and I had a dream of like being on Broadway. Like I remember right before I left, someone was like, "What's your goal? Like give me your number one goal." And I was like, "To be on Broadway before the age of 27." That's what my goal was, and that's how I arrived in New York. And then I would go to these auditions, and nobody looked like me in the waiting room. It was all like very kind of like conventional looking people with, no one had long hair, no one had facial hair. Everyone was always wearing a blue button up because that's what they teach you in acting school. They tell you, go to an audition and wear a blue button up because anything else will make you stand out and people like blue. So then you show up to this audition room and it's like 15 guys who look exactly the same, all perfectly shaved, all perfect haircuts, all wearing blue button ups. And I just didn't see myself in this world at all. And then I went, and I always wanted to be funny anyway. And I did a bunch of sketch in college. So I was like, after like, auditioning for theater for like a year, I was like, I'm going to try stand up. And then of course, I showed up to stand up and a million like-minded people who are like me and are trying to just be funny all the time. And I was like, okay, this is where I belong. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I do want to do more acting stuff because being on set is really, really fun. And making movies has just been my dream my whole entire life.
Well, and I mean, there's real similarities between the two sort of jobs as well, because whether you're an actor or whether you're a stand-up, you don't necessarily know if the material is going to work until you're doing it. I mean, you can stay at home and write stand-up until you're blue in the face, but until you're in front of a crowd trying to deliver it, you don't really know how good it's going to land.
No, you don't. And there's nothing more crushing than writing something that you think is the bit, where you're like at home and you're writing something and you're like, okay, this is the bit that breaks me out, that gets me the like 5 minute standing ovation on the Tonight Show. And the next thing I know, I have my own sitcom. And then you show up to a show that night and you do it and it just completely bombs. And it's so demoralizing. But as an actor, you don't really know how it's going to play either until you see it. Because you kind of have an idea. Like I was on Search Party and I was in The Big Sick for like a brief second, but I got cut out of that movie. But I could tell when I was on set, I was like, these things are going to be popular. But otherwise, when you're on set and you're working, you can't really tell how it's going to come out when it's edited. So there is an element of still not really knowing how it's going to look as an actor until the final second when it's in front of a crowd, which is you really just have to trust your director and a lot.
No, for sure. And I mean, this something just pops in my head, and I mean, I might be wrong, but I'm not sure if this has ever actually happened, but sort of the idea of being a stand-up and just sort of having that fear out there and trying to deliver and just hoping that everything goes well and the jokes land is almost like it's really like walking right on the line of being psychological horror in many ways. And I'm just trying to think. I've never seen a horror movie that sort of centered around a stand-up because it almost feels like a perfect marriage.
Yeah. Well, to I think to other people it's a horror. To stand-up, it's actually not. I think you're still very nervous before you get on stage, and there's a lot of,
Okay.
like hesitation, but it's actually it starts to kind of become the only way you start to really look forward to that feeling. So I do think there's a great movie in a stand-up comedian who's also maybe killing people or something, or who's witnessing people get killed or something like that. That is a great idea if you
But
write
it's
it.
more off the stage than on. Okay.
Yeah, because I think doing stand-up itself for a stand-up comedian is actually not that scary. It becomes, I mean, it's scary. What am I trying to say? It's not psychologically scary anymore. It kind of becomes something you really, really, really look forward to.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I can see that. Now, thinking back for you, can you boil it down to like, is there maybe a moment in your life or a movie where sort of the light bulb went off in your head and go, okay, I gotta do this. I gotta be in this business.
Oof, that's a really good question. I think, and everyone always makes fun of me for this, but I think it was Vince Vaughn in Swingers.
Oh, that's fucking awesome. You own that.
Okay, thank you.
You own that.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. I don't know why people make fun of me for that. For me, yeah, I watched Swingers and I saw Vince Vaughn in that movie and I was like, this is the funniest, coolest person I've ever seen in my life. And I just want to be like this guy. And I don't even remember how old I was. That movie came out in 94, so I didn't see it when it came out. I must have been like 11 or 12 by the time I saw it. And yeah, I remember. So Vince Vaughn in Swingers was probably the first person I remember really leaving an impression on me as me being like, this is who I want to be.
What's the dream project for you? Because I mean, I'm curious, is it, getting a room at Caesars and getting a run in Vegas, or is it sort of a big budget action movie? Like for you, if you had your druthers, what would be the dream job?
Yeah, that's a really good question because I want both those things. Um, I think the dream life. How about this? I'll say the dream life because it's really hard to decide if I would rather be on doing like a sold out tour every night or being in like an amazing big budget movie. I think the dream would just be to be able to go on tour for like 2 months every year as a stand up and then have my own TV show that I created.
That's cool.
Yeah.
All right. Now, I mean, I guess just to put a bow on all this, because I think what really struck me the most about this movie is that, yeah, it's funny, but it's not goofy funny. It's smart funny. It's deadpan funny. It's borderline scary funny.
Yeah.
For you, and this is a silly question, but I always like to ask it. What's your desert island horror comedy?
Uh, oof. I would probably, and I'd probably say Shaun of the Dead.
Okay.
Now, Shaun of the Dead was I know this was like a really big inspiration for this movie because Nick has told me that. But yes, I would say the first time I saw Shaun of the Dead, it was a revelation to me, and I was like, holy shit, I didn't realize horror could look like this. I didn't realize that like a horror movie could actually be funnier than it is scary. And yeah, I would say Shaun of the Dead. If I had to bring one horror movie, it would be that.
Well, that's a good answer, and I mean, there are some parallels with that, and it cuts deep because it is one of those. It's such a really interesting little piece of indie filmmaking that catches you off guard because, like I said, there are the guffaw moments, and then there's the oh that's smart moments, and then there's the 20 seconds later it's like oh shit he's killing somebody, that's terrifying. It's really one of those movies that can keep you on edge, and I absolutely enjoyed it, and I just wanted to say thanks again for the time today.
Yeah, of course. Thanks so much for having me. And yeah, I that's nice to hear. And that was important to everybody. We really wanted to make sure that all the different genres came through. So it's good to hear that it
Well,
did.
they clicked for sure, and I can't speak enough about it, and just thanks again for the time.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
All right, cheers, man.
This was great. Thanks.